folks, and welcome to Film Spectacle, where I talk movies and politics. I'm Spec, and today I'm going to be discussing John Q. Now, if you haven't seen this movie, then please do yourself a favor, get a box of tissues, cuddle up with a blanket, and watch it now because it's currently free on YouTube, and I don't want to spoil anything for you. And this is from 2002, back when they made movies with a runtime of under 2 hours because Hollywood understood we all have lives to live. So with that runtime, every minute of screen time counts, and this film doesn't waste it, taking you on one hell of an emotional roller coaster. John Q is part drama, part hostage thriller, directed by Nick Cassavetes, starring Denzel Washington, Kimberly Elise, Robert Duvall, James Woods, Anne Heche, and Ray Liotta. Really an all-star cast with everyone fitting their roles so well. Denzel plays John Quincy Archibald, your hardworking, blue-collar American, happily married with a son who plays Little League. One day, while running the bases during a game, little Mike collapses and has to be rushed to the hospital. What started as a normal day becomes a parent's worst nightmare. So they get to the hospital and Mike is taken to be treated. Now here's where most hospital dramas would focus on the brave team of hardworking doctors trying to save the boy's life while dealing with messy love triangles, but this is not that kind of drama. Instead, we spend time with John and Denise going back and forth with insurance as they ultimately learn that their son is in dire need of a heart transplant in order to live. No problem though, right? That's what insurance is for. John has a good labor job with healthcare coverage, so what's the problem? Well, you see, this story takes place in the good old USA. So here's where John finds out that because his hours got cut, he's no longer considered full-time. Therefore, his healthcare coverage changed unbeknownst to him, and his son's life-saving surgery is now not covered because it is too extensive a procedure. So all John has to do is first pay in cash $75,000 in order to get his son's name on the donor list for a heart transplant that'll cost another $175,000 out of pocket, and then his son can live. Welcome to America, folks. The irony of this being filmed on location in Canada that has had single-payer healthcare since 1966 is not lost on me and brings me to the point that this story is uniquely American. You see, this movie would never be made in countries like Canada, Norway, Sweden, the United Kingdom, or even Cuba, China, or Russia, because all of these countries guarantee healthcare to all paid by their tax dollars instead of out of pocket when emergency hits. Anyways, with this new predicament, John and his wife Denise hit the pavement and start trying to find the money for his son's life-saving surgery. The banks are no help, so they have to sell household belongings and valuables and rely heavily on their friends, church, and community for donations. This is long before the days of GoFundMe and feel-good stories about a girl selling lemonade to pay for brain surgery being trotted out by the media. And after raising more than $6,000 and handing it directly to the hospital, little Mike is still being sent home by the doctors because it is still not enough. So with a desperate plea to her husband as their son is getting worse by the minute, two words ring out to John: do something. And do something he does. Armed with a handgun and a father's desperation, he kidnaps the main heart surgeon, played by Woods, and locks them in the ER along with an underpaid security guard, a few do-good nurses, and several anxious patients awaiting care. And here's where the moral ambiguity begins. From here on out, John Q is breaking numerous laws, so police quickly surround the building, and a negotiator, played by Duvall, is brought in to calm tensions and bring the situation to an end. But John, realizing he's a little over his head, is in it for the long haul. He has one mission, and it is to save his son's life. So when he talks to the negotiator, his first demand is to put Mike on the donor list. And after calling our leading insurance hawk, played by Anne Heche, to the scene, she tries to explain that it's not that simple, as she worries that giving in to his demands would lead to more situations like this to happen in the future. But John is making himself at home, and within minutes of taking over the ER, he makes sure everyone is taken care of, decrees healthcare is a right to all of them, and the nurses there begin treating the patients, even letting in a critical patient despite the ongoing hostage situation. So after some more back and forth with the negotiator, he lets a few hostages go in good faith: an immigrant mom with a newborn, and a couple expecting their baby any minute, who are captured by the media as having nothing but praise and respect for John. Now, I know some of you may be thinking about Stockholm Syndrome, but I really don't think that's what's happened here. In the ER, after all, is another couple. A woman beaten and her man doing all the talking. Instantly, every hostage and John sees that this woman is a victim in an abusive relationship, and we see this play out. The abuser feels emboldened to take on John, but John fights back and subdues him with the help of his girlfriend, now freeing herself from his clutches. It's very clear that John is not the bad guy here, and his hostages know that pretty much from the get-go. Because to John, and nearly everyone else in this movie, healthcare should be simple. If someone is sick, they get care. Simple, but not in America. So by now, the news media is circling the scene like vultures, and hoping that this is their white Bronco moment, they talk to John's best friend Jimmy, leading to one of the best monologues in the film. He says John should have just been born rich. What we hold sacred in this country isn't values, it's value. What we have is haves and have-nots. We have blue collar and white collar and no collar. Seriously, it's an incredible monologue that is every bit relevant today, and this movie is now 22 years old. So even though John is the quote-unquote terrorist in this situation, he now has the support of most of his kidnappees, a giant crowd of people outside cheering for him, and his face is now on every television in America as a working-class hero fighting a corrupt system. But the police chief, played by Ray Liotta, is wanting to get this wrapped up nice and neat for his electoral aspirations, so naturally, he thinks the better route is direct action as opposed to talking it out any longer. The SWAT team sneaks in through the vents and are able to take a shot on John, injuring his arm, but John is able to take down the sniper in the process. So the news media, having hacked into the ER cameras and phone lines, not only shows the botched attempt by the police to take John out, but airs a private conversation between John, Denise, and Mike that is heard across the nation, and I'm now into my third hard cry of this film. But after overhearing this conversation, our insurance lady has had a change of heart and decides to put Mike's name on the donor list, realizing that she in fact does have a working heart, unlike little Mikey. So with a police sniper as a hostage now, John demands that Mike be brought to the ER to be with him in exchange for the sniper. The sniper is released, Mike is rushed into the ER, and John makes the decision that if it's a heart that his son needs, then he can have his. Raising a gun to his temple, the doctors, nurses, and hostages see that he's serious. So after a heated ethical debate on him committing suicide versus someone dying from another cause, when all you need is someone to die in order to save Mike's life, John writes out a will and 2 hostages sign as witness. But just in the nick of time, and you are all the way on the edge of your seat, a healthy donor's heart from a car crash is being flown in via helicopter to be given to Mike. John doesn't kill himself. The heart surgeon performs the surgery with the new heart, and Mike is out of surgery and on the road of recovery. John is taken into custody for his numerous crimes, not without the police booking the wrong black guy first. And next we see John on trial and convicted on kidnapping charges. But the conviction doesn't matter to John. Family does. And seeing his son's smiling face as he's being escorted to prison is all he needs to know that he did the right thing. My biggest critique of this film is in the sequence at the end with liberal talking heads from Hillary Clinton to Bill Maher talking about our corrupt healthcare system, leading one to think that these people actually support fixing our corrupt system. This film unfortunately fell for the trap of believing in the two-party system and ultimately wants the audience to have the takeaway that liberals are the good guys fighting for your healthcare, unlike those bad Republicans over there. And newsflash, it's 22 years later, and Hillary Clinton proudly declared Medicare for All would never come to pass during a 2016 campaign speech, and our sitting president says he would veto it if it were to ever reach his desk. 22 years later, and our healthcare system is still for profit, big pharma still buys off politicians and doctors alike, and you're bombarded with advertisements about prescription drugs 24/7 instead of joining hands with your fellow Americans to demand a better, more ethical system. Overall, I really love this movie, with Denzel and Kimberly the absolutely killing it, and really all of the performances, but also the commentary on our healthcare system and the economic struggles of everyday, hardworking Americans. But what this movie does best is it offers you the hypothetical of a person holding up a hospital in order to receive life-saving care. So I want to end this video with one more hypothetical situation. Imagine for a moment that your house is on fire and that our fire departments work the same as our healthcare system. Your house is burning down, the fire department shows up, but before they do anything about the fire, they need your insurance card first. If you're like the majority of Americans who are uninsured or underinsured, then you're out of luck and your house will burn to the ground. But if you're privileged and fortunate enough to have insurance, then you may still have a house still standing by the end, and hopefully the delay of insurance bureaucracy wasn't an issue in getting to the fire in time. Sound ridiculous? Yes. It absolutely is. You could say the same for our police departments as well. Imagine for a moment that you were just mugged and assaulted. The police show up and look at your insurance and tell you, oh, sorry, the assault isn't covered. These hypotheticals are absolutely insane, but for some reason, Americans have accepted that our healthcare system should work this way. Instead of doing what nearly every developed country on earth does by paying healthcare costs through our tax dollars, we do it through privatization and putting the burden of the cost onto the people and/or their employer. And when you or your loved one are hit with an emergency, something you could never plan for, like say your son collapses during a baseball game from an unknown heart defect, then the primary function of our healthcare system should be treating and caring for them instead of milking this emergency for as much profit as possible. So in the end, John Q is a little hand-fisted with the messaging, but to this day, this movie calls out the American healthcare system in a way I've never seen any other movie do. It gives the audience a brutal hypothetical of what if this was your child? What would you do if you, like John, had less than $1,000 to your name, are behind on your bills despite working full time, your child needs surgery that'll cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and your insurance is no help? Nowadays, we have GoFundMe and internet fundraising to help people, but that's still playing into a bootstraps, individualist mentality instead of demanding more from your country. Why, after all, do we even pay taxes if they don't go towards helping the American people by providing things like healthcare to all instead of funding foreign wars for all? Our tax dollars are being spent on violence abroad and excessive police budgets at home, subsidizing big tech and corporate America, all instead of taking care of the people. And again, you can just compare to other countries around the world. Our news media will rattle on about how evil Cuba and China are, but both of these countries have healthcare for all and even provide housing to all. So listen again, just in case you missed it, but our American healthcare system is significantly behind nearly every other developed country on earth because it does not guarantee healthcare to all, even in communist countries currently living under American sanctions. Anyways, I could go on all day about the corruption of our healthcare system, but I think John Q does a better job at convincing how heartless our system is than I ever could. So do yourself a favor, give it a watch, have yourself a cry, and then join me in fighting for something better. Because like Denise told John, it's time for us to do something. Anyways, that's all I have for this one, folks. Like and subscribe if you're enjoying things over here, and stay tuned for my next video.